National Electrical Code Section 406.5 Jones states that ceiling fans shall be grounded. This code requirement applies to all ceiling fans, regardless of whether the building in which they are installed has grounded wiring. In a knob and tube wiring system, a ground wire is not present. Therefore, a ceiling fan installed in such a system cannot be grounded directly to the wiring. One possible solution is to install a grounding kit. Some aftermarket grounding kits can be installed on knob and tube wiring to provide a ground path. Another option is to install a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI. A GFCI will trip if there is a ground fault, providing protection against electric shock. A final option is to not install a ceiling fan. If the house is not grounded and no practical grounding solution is available, it is recommended not to install a ceiling fan. Even though the likelihood of an electrical shock from an ungrounded ceiling fan in a knob and tube house is low, it is still against code and poses a potential safety hazard. It is important to prioritize safety and comply with electrical codes when installing electrical fixtures and equipment. As an electrician, one would not install a ceiling fan in a knob and tube house without a proper grounding solution. The safety of the occupants and the integrity of the electrical system are paramount. When dealing with older electrical systems like knob and tube wiring, understanding the code requirements and potential safety hazards is crucial. Knob and tube wiring is an older method of electrical wiring that was commonly used in homes built in the early 20th century. It consists of single insulated conductors run within walls or ceilings, supported by porcelain knobs and tubes. Unlike modern wiring systems, knob and tube wiring typically does not include a grounding conductor. This lack of grounding poses a significant safety risk, as it can increase the likelihood of electric shock or fire in the event of a fault. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, is a set of standards for the safe installation of electrical wiring and equipment in the United States. It is updated every 3 years and provides comprehensive guidelines for electrical installations, including requirements for grounding, wiring methods, overcurrent protection, and equipment safety. The NEC is enforced by local authorities and is intended to protect people and property from electrical hazards. Grounding is a critical safety measure in electrical systems. It provides a low impedance path for fault current to flow back to the source, causing the overcurrent protection device, such as a circuit breaker or fuse, to trip and de-energize the circuit. This helps to prevent electric shock and reduce the risk of fire. In modern wiring systems, a grounding conductor, typically a bare or green insulated wire, is included in the wiring to provide this ground path. When installing a ceiling fan in a home with knob and tube wiring, the absence of a grounding conductor presents a challenge. The NEC requires that ceiling fans be grounded to ensure safety. However, directly grounding the ceiling fan to the knob and tube wiring is not possible, as there is no ground wire present. Several potential solutions exist for grounding a ceiling fan in a home with knob and tube wiring. Firstly, a grounding kit can be installed. These kits typically consist of a grounding rod that is driven into the earth outside the home and connected to the electrical system. The grounding rod provides a path for fault current to flow to ground, helping to protect against electric shock. Secondly, a ground fault circuit interrupter, or GFCI, can be installed. A GFCI is a device that monitors the current flowing in a circuit and detects any imbalance between the hot and neutral conductors. If an imbalance is detected, which indicates a ground fault, the GFCI will quickly trip and energize the circuit, preventing electric shock. GFCIs are commonly used in bathrooms, kitchens, and other areas where there is a risk of water exposure. Thirdly, it may be recommended to not install a ceiling fan. If the home is not grounded and no practical grounding solution is available, it may be safest to simply not install a ceiling fan. While this may be inconvenient, it eliminates the risk of electric shock associated with an ungrounded ceiling fan. When evaluating the safety of electrical installations, it is important to consider the potential hazards and the likelihood of those hazards occurring. In the case of an ungrounded ceiling fan in a home with knob and tube wiring, the likelihood of an electrical shock may be low. However, the potential consequences of such a shock can be severe, including serious injury or even death. Therefore, it is important to prioritize safety and take appropriate measures to mitigate the risk of electric shock. In addition to the specific code requirements for ceiling fans, there are also general requirements for electrical safety that apply to all electrical installations. These requirements include the use of approved wiring methods, proper overcurrent protection, and the correct installation of electrical equipment. It is important to ensure that all electrical work is performed by qualified electricians who are familiar with the NEC and local electrical codes. When working with knob and tube wiring, it is important to take extra precautions to avoid damaging the insulation on the conductors. The insulation on knob and tube wiring can become brittle and cracked over time, which can increase the risk of electric shock. It is also important to avoid disturbing the knobs and tubes that support the wiring, as they can be easily broken. If any damage to the wiring or supports is observed, it should be repaired immediately by a qualified electrician. In some cases, it may be necessary to replace knob and tube wiring with modern wiring methods. This is a significant undertaking that can be expensive and disruptive. However, it may be necessary to ensure the safety of the home and its occupants. When replacing knob and tube wiring, it is important to follow all applicable codes and regulations. The new wiring should be properly grounded and installed in accordance with the NEC. The existing knob and tube wiring should be disconnected and removed or abandoned in place. When installing electrical fixtures and equipment in a home with knob and tube wiring, it is important to consider the age of the wiring and the potential for problems. The wiring may be undersized for modern electrical loads, which can lead to overheating and fire. It is also important to ensure that the wiring is properly protected from physical damage. In addition to the safety considerations, there are also practical considerations when installing electrical fixtures and equipment in a home with knob and tube wiring. The wiring may be difficult to access, and the existing electrical boxes may be too small for modern devices. It may be necessary to modify the wiring or install new electrical boxes to accommodate the new fixtures and equipment. When planning electrical work in a home with knob and tube wiring, it is important to consult with a qualified electrician. An electrician can assess the condition of the wiring and provide recommendations for improving its safety and reliability. An electrician can also perform the electrical work in a safe and code-compliant manner. In addition to the NEC, there may also be local electrical codes that apply to electrical installations in a particular area. These codes may be more stringent than the NEC and may require additional safety measures. It is important to be familiar with the local electrical codes before performing any electrical work. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to avoid injury. Always turn off the power to the circuit before working on any electrical wiring or equipment. Use insulated tools and wear appropriate personal protective equipment such as safety glasses and gloves. If you are not comfortable performing electrical work, it is best to hire a qualified electrician. The decision of whether or not to install a ceiling fan in a home with knob and tube wiring is a complex one that depends on a variety of factors. These factors include the condition of the wiring, the availability of grounding solutions, and the homeowner's risk tolerance. It is important to carefully consider all of these factors before making a decision. In general, it is recommended to prioritize safety and comply with electrical codes when installing electrical fixtures and equipment. If there is any doubt about the safety of an electrical installation, it is best to consult with a qualified electrician. Electrical safety is a serious matter, and it is important to take all necessary precautions to protect yourself and others from electrical hazards. The information provided in this narration is for educational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional electrical advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician before performing any electrical work.